sustainable digital economy that works for everyone. So every day, we work with banks, merchants, businesses, cities, and governments to solve human needs with human ideas. Every capability we build on, every investment we make, and every partnership we enter into is driven by MasterCard's mission to improve people's lives. We're helping retailers reimagine how people shop, developing new digital-first payment experiences, helping independent workers thrive in the gig economy, enabling people and businesses to move money around the world, making transactions of all kinds safer and more secure, developing new artificial intelligence solutions to detect and fight fraud, giving people and businesses more control over their financial data, modernizing commercial payments for businesses of all sizes all around the world, empowering every business everywhere to drive economic equality, all in a pursuit of our vision of an economy where everyone can reach their potential. And we continue to redefine the look, the feel, and even the sound of a brand that touches the lives of billions of people every day. At MasterCard, we are here to help our partners help people. Because we believe when you start with people, you can start something priceless.
The world has changed. Have we adapted? Is it still business as usual? Can we get what we need? Can I send my loved ones money? Can I even go to the bank? What now? As RCBC looks ahead, we're keeping to heart your every need. With RCBC's widest range of digital services today, we can help you continue to grow your business. Send support to your loved ones. Get cash when you need it. You have our services on hand, so you can continue banking with us easily, safely, and conveniently. Hand in hand, let's keep going and leave those worries behind. Because at RCBC, we are moving forward with you every step of the way. Learn more and get started now.
Welcome everyone to a cashless society driven by QR codes. This event is presented by Phoenix Information and Communication Technology Committee and made possible by MasterCard and Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation. We would like to invite everybody to a prayer which will be followed by the Philippine National Anthem.
Our ever-loving Father, the core of every reason, the source of truth. You who made the earth and the heavens are the ultimate goal of every knowledge seekers, the infinite wisdom, the cause of all that is good. We are truly grateful for this opportunity to gather together as a community despite the challenges we face each day. Yet you remained and gave us strength to carry on the responsibilities of bearing intelligence and using them for better purposes. We now humbly ask you to join us in our endeavor to explore the wonders of life in the world for knowledge's sake, that in whatever we learn today, we become more grounded to you, who is truth, who is love. We pray that you bless our speakers, the fount of your infinite knowledge, that they can share something worthwhile despite the limited time we have. They can channel all they know and share to us the beauty and truth of living as your child. We pray that you guide our participants, the seekers of your boundless knowledge, that they may continue to persevere in the search and be deemed worthy to share what they learn from today's session. Sanctify us, O Lord, not because we are worthy of it, but because we believe in your love and mercy, that at the end of the day, we can take home something that's amazing and meaningful. This we ask and pray through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Let's welcome our host for today's webinar, Mr. Dennis O. Valdez, President of Cebuana Luwilier Bank.
Good afternoon. I am Dennis Valdez, President of Cebuana Luwilier Bank and member of the Phoenix ICT Committee. I will be your host for today's webinar entitled A Cashless Society Driven by QR Codes. We are simultaneously streamed live in Phoenix official Facebook page and YouTube channel. This event has been made possible by our generous partners, MasterCard and RCBC. To formally open this event, may I call on Phoenix President and Accra Law Senior Legal Counsel, Attorney Francisco Ed Lim.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Good afternoon, fellow Phoenix members and distinguished guests here in the virtual meeting room and those watching through the online platforms, Facebook and YouTube. I would like to welcome you all to our webinar, A Cashless Society Driven by QR Codes. Deputy Governor Mamerto Tangonan will walk us through BSP's Digital Payment Transformation Roadmap, its initiatives and strategies for achieving an efficient, safe, and inclusive payments ecosystem. Additional speakers and panelists from MasterCard, Mr. Robert Moore, Vice President, Real-Time Payments, Asia Pacific. Mr. Paul Haberer, Vice President, Real-Time Business Development and Account Management. And Mr. Mark Ruiz, co-founder and president of Happinoy, will share how they're pursuing their digital payments initiatives in the Philippines. Thank you to our guest speakers for making time to share their knowledge, expertise, and insights on this development. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic had accelerated digitalization in our country. Whether we like it or not, digital payments will be part of the new normal, and we have to embrace it. So thank you again, our dear speakers and our audience for participating in today's event. Thank you more especially to MasterCard and RCBC for making this event possible, and to the ICT committee and our staff for organizing this webinar. Again, good afternoon and enjoy the rest of our webinar. Maraming salamat at mabuhay ang Phoenix.
Thank you, Attorney Francis. So just some housekeeping rules for the participants in the meeting room. Please type in your questions at the Q&A button on your screen. We will try to go through the questions as time permits. For those who would like to request for a certificate of attendance, here are the prerequisites. You should have logged in within 15 minutes from the start of the event, attend at least 75%, and answer the feedback from at the end of the session. Then send your requests to jtmanalo@phoenix.org.ph or jgruspe@phoenix.org.ph. May I request also the secretariat to have the emails available in the chat box for the members. Fees may also apply. So we are very fortunate today to have an excellent lineup of speakers. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Deputy Governor and Head for Payments and Currency Management Sector, Mr. Mamerto E. Tangonan, MasterCard Asia Pacific Vice President for Real-Time Payments, Robert Moore, and Happy Pinoy Microventures Inc. Co-Founder and President, Mark Joaquin Ruiz. Each speaker will have 15 to 20 minutes for their message and or presentation. Q&A will follow after all their presentations. Another MasterCard representative, Mr. Paul Haberer, will join the panel. So let's get started. Our keynote speaker is the head of the Payments and Currency Management Sector, or PCMS, of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. The PCMS is tasked to address the interplay between digital money and physical currency and support the digital transformation of the country's financial services. He leads PCMS in maintaining the safety and integrity of the Philippine currency, as well as ensuring a well-functioning payments and cash ecosystem that fosters long-term economic growth. He brings with him over 28 years of experience in digital and traditional financial services, telecommunications, technology, financial inclusion, and consulting services. He earned his BA in Civil Engineer from the University of the Philippines and his Executive MBA from the Asian Institute of Management. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome BSP Deputy Governor Mamerto E. Tangonan.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to Attorney Francis and to the distinguished members and officers of Phoenix, as well as to my fellow presenters and speakers and panelists in this Phoenix webinar. So thank you for this opportunity to share with you the developments and benefits on the recent initiatives on accelerating the journey towards cashless or cash-light society through QR codes as embodied in the BSP's Digital Payments Transformation Roadmap. So there were 4 studies that were conducted from 2013 to up to the first semester of year 2020 to look into the growth of the share of digital payments over total retail payments transactions in the country. And I'm very happy to present you the results of a summary of the results of this study that shows us that digital payments have evidently gained wide market acceptance and adoption. So digital payments penetration, or the share of digital over total payments transaction volume, has increased from 1% in 2013 to 17% as of the first half of 2020. So in absolute terms, that's a growth from like 25 million in 2013 to 782 million in a span of like maybe more than 7 years. And the value has likewise grown tremendously. So that tells us that our financial inclusion landscape could really cultivate the further scaling of digital payments. Proof of that is first, the account ownership has grown from 23% in 2017 to 29% in 2019. That may not be that large a number, but what's interesting there, it's driven by 300% growth in active e-money wallets. And what's even more remarkable is that the account ownership in the Class E socioeconomic segment has increased by 13 percentage points. So that means that digital payments has started and growing and penetrating all segments of our society. Now, in terms of access, the 16 in 2019, this was pre-pandemic. Almost 70% of adults own a mobile phone, and half of those mobile phones are smartphones. And 53% of the adults are internet users. But now, despite those very encouraging numbers, really the situation presents a very good opportunity to even make these digital channels more accessible, as only 7 out of 10 unbanked adults have a mobile phone. So the sustained uptrend in the volume and value of digital payments shows the effectiveness of the retail payments reforms earlier undertaken by the BSP. Again, I mean, who could imagine how difficult it could have been if we had to go through the pandemic and with the lockdowns without PesoNet and InstaPay. So that's very unimaginable. And maybe before I proceed, I'd like to request the members of the audience who have seen my previous presentations on QR codes and digital payments transaction roadmap, as I'd just like to give a big picture for the benefit of those who are, most of you in the audience who are hearing me present these topics for the first time. So going back to this slide, we see that the PesoNet and InstaPay combined volumes have grown tremendously from March 2020 to same period this year, March 2021. In March 2021, we already are reaching about 39 million transactions for PesoNet and InstaPay, with over 550 billion pesos worth of transactions. So the National Retail Payment System Framework, which has nurtured PesoNet and InstaPay, provides an enabling environment for inclusive, interoperable, competitive, and more innovative digital payment services in the country. So, PesoNet and InstaPay are both funds transfer services in their simplest forms. So, where do we, or which payments use case do we address next? Funds transfers are great for remittances and payments of social benefits like the ayuda, but they are not readily useful for use cases like merchant payments, supplier payments, or even utility or bills payment. So if we address all these large payments use cases, we'll be addressing about 97% of the total retail payments transaction volume. And what we can note here is that merchant payments alone account for 70% of the payments transaction volume. But yet, up until this time, we could say that it still has low penetration in terms of digital payments. So what do we do next? The Bangko Sentral has charted its current and future initiatives in a holistic and comprehensive way through the Digital Payments Transformation Roadmap, or DPTR, for 2020 to 2023 to achieve greater digital payments adoption in the country. Strategically anchored on three critical pillars, the roadmap is envisioned to successfully transform the Philippines from a cash-heavy into a cash-light economy. So the first pillar is the digital payment streams. So these embody the BSP's key initiatives of creating compelling, large-scale digital payments use cases, such as merchant payments, supplier payments, and even bills payments. The next is the digital finance infrastructure. So the adoption of new platforms enable efficient delivery of additional digital payment streams and enhance customer experience. So examples of initiatives in this pillar include the PhilID national ID system, and also the PhilPass Plus peso real-time gross settlement system that's running under the modern ISO 20022 messaging format. And the third is the digital governance and standards. So to sustain the efficiency, inclusiveness, competitiveness, and safety of digital payments, and to build trust in digital payments, we must ensure that the expansion of payments use cases is underpinned by sound digital governance and standards. So examples here are the QR Ph, which we are going to discuss in greater detail as we go along, the ISO 20022 messaging format, and the open finance and API standards, as well as data governance policy. So all these have are geared towards achieving the objective of reaching 50% of total volume of retail payments into digital form, as well as having at least 70% of Filipino adults owning bank or electronic money accounts. So we not only so it's like we're increasing the usage of digital payments by increasing the usage per user, by of course enabling the users, the customers, to use digital payments for the other payments use cases like merchant payments, supplier payments, and bills payments. And also increasing the number of users. So if you factor those two in, then you increase the usage of digital payments. So going a step back, in November of 2019, the BSP, together with the payments industry, launched the QR Ph. So this is the national QR code standard for financial or payment transactions. So it has transformed the fragmented QR-driven payment services into interoperable payment solutions. QR Ph can be used as a viable alternative to coins, as it caters to low-value, high-volume transactions such as payments to merchants and person-to-person payments. In November 2019, QR Ph P2P was made available for person-to-person payments such as remittances, and even government-to-person payments like the ayuda. From 6 pilot participants back then, there are now over 20 participants. And from a little of over 1 million peso worth of transactions in November 2019, that has grown to over 661 million by April 2021, with almost 72,000 transactions during the month. So this trend demonstrates the accelerating shift in preference among more Filipinos for convenient digital modes of payments. So we took the earlier success of QR Ph P2P and bring it over to merchant payments to address some of the key challenges in digitalizing merchant payments. Up until today, the dominant digital merchant payment method is the card payment. However, its cost structure is limiting its use to higher-end merchants, while its fees are keeping the service from the reach of micro-small merchants. Meanwhile, the simplicity of QR code-enabled payments gives it the potential to reach even the smaller players, which require less expensive infrastructure to implement. You only need a smartphone and the internet to operate or accept QR Ph P2M merchant payment. So the value proposition of paying through QR code was bolstered with the issuance of the national QR code standard, or we call QR Ph. It transforms the fragmented QR-driven payment service into interoperable payment solutions. Remember during the early 2000s when you were seeing at least 5 POS terminals from different payment service providers with as many standees informing us that, us customers, that this card is accepted here and that card is accepted and so on. So that was an expensive but necessary proposition for the higher end merchants. But we didn't like to see QR codes going the same route. So when branded cards like MasterCard, Visa, JCB came out, their interoperable payment service made them dominant, and we saw the number of POS terminals dwindle to about 2, perhaps with one acting as a backup. Hence, interoperability is really a key to efficiency. So the full implementation of QR Ph can likewise contribute towards the attainment of a coinless state, as QR Ph-enabled payments may be a viable alternative to coins, given that it caters to low-value, high-volume transactions such as payments to merchants. So the pilot for QR Ph merchant payments was launched last month and is expected to be on full commercial launch by September 2021, that's this year. So QR Ph P2M allows payments to small unbanked vendors and tricycle drivers to be done in an affordable and safe manner. This will empower small economic actors, including those in the informal sector, to take part in digital payments ecosystem. Of course, QR Ph payments can also be used for purchase of goods and services in restaurants, pharmacies, supermarkets, hardware, and department store. So let me show you a video to demonstrate how QR Ph P2M will work once launched commercially by September 2021.
QR codes are everywhere, in posters, flyers, and even in product labels. They have paved the way to easier and better modes of business. Since cashless transactions have become common, QR code payment is not far behind with the convenience that it provides. It benefits both the shopper and the seller because transactions are made faster and easier. With QR code payment, the hassle of counting cash or even bringing out a card, tapping, dipping, or swiping it, then signing a charge slip is completely eliminated. With the various payment apps available, the journey of purchasing and paying has never been this painless. Introducing InstaPay QR Payment. It lets you pay using your bank or e-wallet app by simply scanning the QR Ph code. QR Ph is the national QR code standard that interconnects various QR codes in the Philippines. So now, you can use any participating bank app or e-wallet to pay for goods and services anywhere you see the QR Ph code. It follows the Europay MasterCard Visa, or EMV standard, a global standard for secure payments using chip cards. This will totally change the way we pay, making it safer and more convenient. All you have to do is simply scan and pay. Open your bank's app or e-wallet and choose Pay via QR. Scan the QR code and type the amount to be paid. Check the details and approve the transaction. You will get a confirmation message once the transaction is complete. All these without having to touch your wallet. As more and more merchants or sellers are getting into the QR payment wave, soon paying via QR PH will be the gold standard, be it in supermarkets, department stores, public transportation, restaurants, boutiques, hardware stores, drugstores, sari-sari stores, and even online. So for faster, safer, more convenient payments, choose InstaPay via QR. Scanning of other bank and e-wallet QR codes is made possible by QR PH, securely interconnecting QR codes in the Philippines.
So what this means to retailers, merchants, and even billers is that you can use QR Ph P2M to, number one, accept payments for goods and services over the counter. Or you can even put this online for especially those who are running e-commerce marketplaces or online stores to make it convenient and easy for customers to make their digital payments. Also for billers, I understand that some of the financial institutions are going to support their customers with the QR Ph P2M printed on the bill, so that customers like us can simply scan the QR Ph, and that would conveniently lead to the settlement or payment of our bills. And the beauty of this is you need not have to maintain merchant billing or collection agreements with many banks in order to reach customers. So one agreement or maybe two for backup can suffice for your merchant payments and bills payment, even bills payment requirements. The next video, I want to show you that the QR Ph is indeed inclusive and can...
Times may have changed.
Sorry about that. And can serve the needs of micropayments to micro merchants, including those in the informal sector. Let's watch this. Can we play that video? Or maybe I go back. Go back and then go forward.
Times may have changed, but still, we continue to see the possibilities and dream of a new beginning, a better way of life. We do what we can to keep ourselves safe, healthy, and thriving in the new normal. And with these new challenges, when businesses and citizens need their financial transactions to be more convenient, safe, and secure, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is ready to implement the new national QR standard for merchants to accept payments. A necessity in the new normal, digital payments are now easier and more convenient to use for both consumers and businesses. QR PH streamlines the process for merchants to accept payments with just one QR code. Consumers pay for transactions using their preferred banks or e-wallet apps. and merchants are able to accept them without having to use multiple QR codes or integrate with many devices and systems. Our dream of a better life only grows stronger. And with the BSP's national QR standards for retail payments, we can continue to empower Filipinos, give them easy and better access to services and products, and ensure safe, secure, and more convenient transactions. The QR PH, one national standard for QR payments for one strong digital nation.
So there we can see that we're even determined for QR Ph to reach even the micro, small enterprises, even those in the informal sector, so that we could really make digital payments very pervasive. And for the members here in the audience who are into retail and online or brick and mortar sector, QR Ph really makes a strong case for you to start adopting it, because as we've seen earlier, really more and more people are preferring to pay digitally than than cash. So apart from, just to wrap up my presentation, apart from the QR Ph, there are other forthcoming payments digitalization initiatives in the pipeline. First is the multiple batch settlement of PesoNet transfers. Currently, PesoNet settles once a day towards the late in the afternoon, and also gets to credit the accounts of payees in about early evening, by early evening. So the growing popularity also of PesoNet has raised the demand for settlement to happen more frequently. So we are working with the payments industry to deliver just that, perhaps starting with the settlement noontime and towards noontime, and another settlement by like as per current practice, which happens at about 4:30 in the afternoon. So that will make the crediting of the payments to the accounts of the payees even quicker and sooner. Another initiative is the interoperable bills payment. So this will make paying bills digitally more convenient, as any payer can pay any biller regardless of the financial institutions where they maintain accounts. So right now in the Philippines, I think we're lucky to have around 600, or maybe even an optimistic estimate of 1,000 billers who accept payments of bills online. In countries where they have adopted interoperable bills payments, like Australia, there are like more than 45,000 billers that customers can pay online. So that's what we also want to achieve here. And the next is the request to pay facility. So set for rollout by the last quarter of this year to early first quarter of next year. It will empower payees to initiate collections by simply sending a request to pay to the payer. So the payer need not type the payer's account details or even the payment amount, as the payer only has to authorize the collection instruction from the payee. So that even enhances the customer experience of both the merchants or the sellers, as well as the customers or the buyers. And lastly, the direct debit. So this is scheduled to launch for next year. It will allow customers to better manage their recurring payments, such as monthly rental, or subscriptions by simply authorizing the payees to pull funds from the account of the payers. On the part of the payees, having a direct debit arrangement would help streamline collection efforts and provide assurance that expected cash inflows are realized on time. Finally, the transition to digital payments should provide social, economic, and financial benefits, such as broader financial inclusion, poverty reduction, technological innovation, efficiency, and lower costs. With such a large base and low penetration of merchants utilizing and accepting digital payments, the potential is indeed huge. And all these, the Digital Payments Transformation Roadmap 2020 to 2023, including the QR Ph, contribute to Governor Diokno's strategic direction of bringing BSP closer to the Filipino people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DG Mert, for sharing the roadmap to further expand BSP's vision for digital payments transformation. I very much appreciate the holistic approach of the BSP, so all sectors of the market would reap its benefits. Actually, DG, just during your presentation, there was a slew of questions already, so please keep it coming. We will try to field this later during the open panel discussion. Okay, so our second speaker is Mr. Robert Moore. Rob joined MasterCard Asia team in Singapore in July 2019 to focus on account-to-account or real-time payments in the region, specifically the InstaPay service in the Philippines. Prior to the move, Rob had been with VocaLink, who provide the UK's faster payments, batch, and ATM services from 2010 until the acquisition by MasterCard in 2017. Roger, please go ahead and field your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to follow the Deputy Governor and to echo some of the themes that have been highlighted. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay and can see the slides on the screen. So as you can probably gather from the photo that I've put as my opening slide, it would be fantastic to be talking to everyone today from one of those fantastic hotels around Makati Triangle. But you know, we're living in a changed time, so I'm very grateful for the opportunity, thanks to Finex, to be able to talk to you today. So thank you to the Finex members and distinguished guests and my fellow panelists. So I'll be spending around 15 minutes today to talk to you about what I've called the business of real-time payments. So how do we translate some of those features and opportunities that the Deputy Governor has been talking about into business opportunities? So the areas that we'll be talking through today are around real-time payments from the global trend to the business opportunities here in the Philippines. So I'll start with an overview of real-time payments at a global and a regional level, and then move into the enormous potential for growth that we see in the Philippines. I'll then step back a bit to talk about how we've seen real-time payments being adopted in different markets, and how different use cases emerge over time, and how these trends have actually informed both the roadmap for the BSP and the implementation through the InstaPay service. And finally, we'll talk about how these features can help to drive business. So across the world, we're seeing a major shift to real-time payments, and I'm pleased to say that MasterCard is playing a role in a number of these different markets. In the past 9 years alone, we've seen an increase from 16 to 56 national real-time payment systems. And the definitions are sometimes nuanced, but when I'm talking about real-time payments, what I mean is it's an electronic account-to-account payment. The time for the payee to receive the funds can be counted in seconds, and it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So for me, real-time payments are synonymous with digital payments. If you look to the right-hand side of the graphic, you'll see that there's a concentration of payment systems in the Asia-Pacific region. So let's look at some of the standout statistics we're seeing here. So adoption in Asia Pacific is leading the way, and it's underpinned by some common features that we'll be talking about: modern international messaging standards and things like QR and proxy services. So some examples from the region. In Singapore in February 2020, Singapore's Pay Now corporate service transferred 3 billion Singapore dollars worth of value, which was an increase of 7x over its value from a year before. In Thailand, and this was in 2019, PromptPay processed 2.6 billion transactions worth over 400 billion US dollars and has continued to grow from there. India, the undisputed global leader in real-time payments, where we're seeing 41 million transactions per day. But not to be outdone, the Philippines, as the Deputy Governor referenced, we've seen huge growth in both InstaPay and PaySerNet. And last year alone, we saw growth in the InstaPay service of over 300%. But there's still massive untapped potential in the Philippines. So even with that level of growth, there's still a significant number, around 75% of transactions being made in cash. This was back in 2018. So no doubt we'll start to see some decrease in cash as a result of consumer behaviors changing during the pandemic, but cash is still the dominant payment method. And that brings its own challenges for your businesses. There are security concerns, the hidden cost of cash, and the time and effort associated with reconciling and banking cash deposits, particularly in times of restricted travel, such as we've seen in the past few years. So the high volume of cash payments is one factor why we believe there's so much potential in the Philippines, but it's not the only factor. So first of all, there is this untapped potential for digital payments growth, and that's through payments made in cash. But also online payments and e-commerce, something globally that's driving digital payments. And then we come to two factors, different sides of the payment equation that the Deputy Governor also referenced: increase in the number of consumers and increase in the number of merchants. So firstly, increase in the number of consumers. The market size in the Philippines is significant, but we absolutely need to continue to focus on inclusive growth to ensure that digital payments don't promote a digital divide. And on the other side of the equation, lowering the barriers to entry for merchants and then being able to accept digital payments through QR and other form factors. And all of these, as you've seen, are underpinned by the BSP's targets to digitize payment flows. So with that as the context, what I'd like to do now is switch focus to how we've seen real-time payments play out in the different markets. So what we've done is categorize the different phases of real-time adoption under the headings shown. So around starting with building trust and engagement, moving into promoting the use of digital payments, then about increasing scale and reach, and ultimately about taking advantage of data flows. And these things all have to be underpinned by strong partnerships across the ecosystem, public and private. Now, this is a model, so it's difficult to show nuances of different markets, but I'll take you through some examples of how we broadly see the real-time payments markets evolving. So typically it's peer-to-peer payments that are the first use case, because uncertainty and trust is a key feature of initial use by consumers. When trying something new, particularly in payments, consumers are nervous about making mistakes, so they experiment with the service by paying friends and family. In Thailand, though, the initial use of the service was actually for consumers to receive disbursements from the government, and that provided a huge factor in driving adoption. So something that we would typically see as a major factor in increasing scale and reach was actually also part of building trust and engagement. So typically, once consumers start to see the benefit of real-time payments, then usage moves into other areas of everyday life. And in Asia Pacific, we've seen movements transfer from a person-to-person payment towards the individual as a small business. So with things like selling goods on Facebook or marketplaces. And that starts to blur the lines between what is an individual and what is a micro or small merchant. And then we see form factors like QR coming to the fore, making acceptance of real-time payments a reality for these micro and smaller merchants. And from this base, consumers become accustomed to being in control of their payments, and the convenience of making digital payments becomes the norm, and it becomes expected across different aspects of daily life. So demand for electronic bill payments becomes both a pull by consumers, but also a push by businesses who are looking to increase certainty in the payments they receive. In developing markets, we often see that the payments between businesses are those that take a longer time to take hold. Use of checks is often a common factor in markets, and the maturity of the business system, the business ecosystem plays a part. So in recent times, we've seen this market adoption life cycle translated into common features of newer real-time payment systems. So essentially, it means that markets coming into the real-time payments market in recent times, they benefit from these learnings. So essentially, they're starting to leapfrog ahead. So we'll look now at some of the common features that we see in comparable markets in Asia Pacific. So peer-to-peer payments, as I've mentioned, they tend to be a given in all of the markets, and they start to build that broad base of users. And then we see two features that help to improve the safety, simplicity, and convenience of making payments. First of all, there's proxy payments, and that's the use of easily shareable information instead of account details and sort codes. So typically that could be something like a mobile phone number, a national ID, business registration codes, or even email addresses. And then QR, the focus of today's webinar, being able to embed those account details into a QR decal means that merchants can start to accept payments as easily as peer-to-peer payments, as shown in the video earlier by the Deputy Governor. So support for corporate payments, that tends to follow, and it's about using the standards that underpin real-time payments to open up payments to, from, and between businesses. And lastly on this slide is a new capability that the Deputy Governor also mentioned, and we're seeing global interest in this, and it's something called request to pay. Now, the payment flow in real-time payments is often referred to as a push payment because it's initiated from the payer to the payee. But request to pay enables an individual, or more often a business, to issue a request to pay message to a consumer, typically when, on completion of a goods or services transaction. And essentially that turns a push payment into a pull payment, increasing the certainty and ease of payment for both the business and the consumer. So here in the Philippines, we're really pleased to have partnered with BankNet to bring some of these features to market through the InstaPay service. So I'll just spend a couple of minutes now talking about some of these newer features that are coming into the market through InstaPay. So first of all, it is about speed, real-time payments, the clearing within a number of seconds with confirmation to the payer and the payee. That's the basic functionality of the InstaPay service around which everything else is built. The proxy service then is something that overlays on top of that, and that provides the simplicity and convenience of using more familiar information to make a payment. So computers are good with 16-digit numbers, but for me, it's easier to pay someone using their mobile phone number, particularly when I can look it up from my mobile phone contacts. Account numbers and sort codes aren't human friendly, and it can be easy to transpose digits and risk then that the payment goes to the wrong account. And QR, a form factor that's becoming increasingly common. In real-time payments, the QR scanning is enabled by the payment service providers, so banks and wallets, through their mobile applications. And it can be used typically for in-store payments, but it can also be printed on bills to make payments simpler and with less errors than manually keying information, or also avoiding people having to travel to payment centers. But QR isn't just about convenience. It's also about the consumer being reassured that the payment details they're using are accurate. And furthermore, QR is the cheapest form of accepting digital payments. It doesn't require complicated or expensive point of sales devices. So it's an ideal mechanism for enabling smaller businesses to participate in digital payments. The introduction of the QR Ph standard in the Philippines, I think, also addresses two key factors that we see in adoption of new payment types. First, it's trust. A recognized paymark like the QR Ph logo is a sign that consumers look for to feel safe. And secondly, interoperability. When consumers are faced with a forest of QR codes from different service providers, it can make it confusing and people become less likely to retry using the service. So next I'll talk about the converging data standards, which is a key driver globally towards real-time payments, and the Philippines is no exception. The InstaPay service is based on a standard called ISO 20022, and that brings a number of benefits over previous payments data standards. First of all, it's able to support more data in the messages in a standard format, and that allows straight-through processing. So examples might include the ability to include an invoice or purchase order number in a payment-related message to make reconciliation simpler. And ISO 20022 also provides for standardized messages that support payment flows. So I covered request to pay on the previous slide, but there are other examples such as RFI, which stands for request for information, and REM, which is remittance advice. And these messages allow senders and receivers to share information via the payment system to reduce manual intervention and delays. And lastly, we're also making the service more secure through the introduction of financial crime solutions. And this will enable us to trace a suspected fraudulent transaction across the network so that financial institutions can start to identify and shut down bad actors and mule accounts. So how do we see these features coming together to create value for business? First of all, it's about cash flow. So the immediate use of funds that are received, and conversely, the ability for you to make payments to your suppliers just in time, because you are confident that the payment will be completed in seconds. Seeing more transactions digitally means that you get more insights into your customer behaviors, but the features also allow the opportunity to create new products and services as well. And I'll talk about an example of that on the next slide. So streamlined reconciliation and reduced time and effort to handle cash ultimately means that you can have more resources directed to where you need them. And that's focused on the customer. So in the next slide, I'll turn our attention to how these opportunities for businesses can be realized through the InstaPay features. Now, I'm not going to talk through all of the examples shown on the slide here, and there are multiple different payments flows such as business to government, government to business, and so on that I haven't included here. But I've picked out a few examples of person to business payments, business to person payments, and business to business payments, just to try and bring to life some of these features. So first of all, in person to business, I think generally the shift from cash to digital, one of the primary benefits is it makes payments simpler for consumers, but it makes them more visible to you as businesses. Proxy and QR provide new opportunities to create products and services as well. And one example that we've seen increased adoption during the pandemic is the use of electronic cash on delivery, or what should really be electronic payment on delivery. And this is where a QR code can be used when consumers are receiving goods, when they receive a delivery to their home. So when something is delivered by courier, rather than paying in cash, they scan a QR code that the courier presents and the payment is made immediately. So for the consumer, it means they don't have to hold cash at home. And for the business, it means that funds are immediately available to use. They're not sat in a courier's vehicle until all deliveries have been completed and the cash has been banked. So in business to person payments, one of the areas we've also seen new business opportunities is with real-time disbursements being a source of competitive advantage. So examples include insurance payouts, and particularly in emergency situations, but also with companies like Grab. Their ability to pay their drivers in real time has been a source of competitive advantage for them. And lastly, in business to business payments, the areas that can be enhanced by real-time payments fall mainly into two areas that I'd like to highlight. First of all, real-time digital payments. The certainty, visibility, and ease of reconciliation of receiving payments digitally, avoiding the cost and the security concerns associated with cash. But secondly, the introduction of value-add messages, request to pay, remittance advice, and request for information. They provide an opportunity to simplify business processes and create the opportunity for more efficient business payments, improving cash flow. So with that, I'd just like to summarize some of the areas that I've spoken through today. So first of all, the market context, it's poised for transformation. All of the factors are there, such as use of cash, growing population, and increasing extrinsic factors that are pushing towards digitization. Secondly, digital payments are good for business. It's not just about cash flow and reconciliation. It can also create competitive advantage. So finally, the benefits are there to be realized, but it takes a concerted business focus to set the direction of where you want to go and what the first steps on that journey are. That concludes my presentation for today. I look forward to your questions in the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Robert Moore. Our third and last speaker is Mr. Joaquin Ruiz. Mark is co-founder and president of Happinoy, a social enterprise that empowers women, micro-entrepreneurs through training, linkage to capital, and new business development. He is also an entrepreneur in residence for Talino Venture Labs, an inclusive tech venture builder, and served as board of director for Small Business Corporation, a government financial institution under the Department of Trade and Industry, implementing policies and programs to assist MSMEs with financing, information services, training, and marketing. Mark is a BS Management Engineering graduate from the Ateneo de Manila and a member of the Global Agenda Council for Social Innovation of the World Economic Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mark Ruiz.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me. It's such a pleasure to be here. To be quite honest and frank with you, I feel like a fish out of water. And when I got the invitation from Mr. Abcedo, I actually said, "Are you sure?" And then he said, "Yes, perhaps it would be good for you to provide a perspective to Phoenix from the grassroots, which is where we at Happinoy operate at." And so I'll try my best to hopefully make this as informative and as insightful for all of you. So my name is Mark Ruiz, co-founder and president of Happinoy. So we're a social enterprise. And allow me to just breeze through and quickly share what we do, how we have been pivoting through this pandemic, and what the opportunities we see are actually in relation to the topic. It's also great to see Deputy Governor Mertangonan here, who has been a strong advocate actually, and we've intersected as well in previous in his previous stints as well as MasterCard actually. So it's great to be here. Thank you. So yeah, so hello, we're Happinoy. We're a social enterprise, which basically is a fancy name to say that we're an organization that was founded and built really to be able to fulfill and solve social problems through sustainable means. As mentioned here, we help sari-sari stores grow their business. And we do this primarily by providing access, and I stress here access to training, microfinance, and business opportunities. So the main thing we do here really is the training, but in terms of microfinance and business opportunities, we see ourselves as really a bridge to connect the sari-sari store owners to the different stakeholders across the entire ecosystem. So let me just run through that very quickly. So as you can see, this is pre-pandemic. This is actually how we would normally do our training. So we offer sari-sari stores training programs. Of course, we have to go by the cute name, Happy Eskwela. And we actually go to where the nanays and the store owners are, see, as you can see here. So if it's in the middle of a field, then so be it. If this around their sari-sari stores, then that's where we have to go. And so this is something that is what is most comfortable, and I guess is how we have been really operating for more than a decade now. But aside from the training, what we really do as a social enterprise is also to organize the sari-sari stores into communities. Community building is a big chunk of what we do, especially because a lot of these sari-sari stores, they're micro-entrepreneurs, micro-enterprises, and if you look at them individually, they're literally quite small, hence the name, hence the term micro-enterprises. But the reality is there's latent strength, really, if you actually add up all the sari-sari stores around the country, as there's practically one sari-sari store for, say, almost every 100 Filipinos, actually. So you'd be hard-pressed to go into an area or a community, whether in urban areas or even the most far-flung rural areas, and not come across this humble micro retail shop, this hole-in-the-wall shop. And so we organize them into communities so that they could not only support each other, but they can also realize that together, they themselves have strength. And what we do as we organize them into communities, as I had mentioned, is to connect them with partners who provide them sources of financing, so we don't do it ourselves, and new business opportunities. And of course, there's a slew of that, anywhere from FMCGs, but also new emerging business opportunities, especially in technology, which is something obviously related to what we are discussing today. But I guess let me share that if you can see that a lot of our work has really been on the ground. Happy Noy and the Sari Sari store owners, due to the pandemic, had to, were affected, absolutely affected, and COVID-19 has changed everything. And practically overnight, behavior change, and actually I wouldn't even call it behavior change, literally survival instinct and adaptation just kicked in. And as you can see in some of these pictures, almost overnight, you see Sari Sari store owners now having to wear masks, enforce social distancing, and of course, quite simply and ingeniously also put coverings on their Sari Sari stores to help stem the contagion. And of course, this period of COVID actually also created a boon as also for remittance, digital services, and of course, digital payments. If we have some level of familiarity. So COVID-19 has changed everything almost overnight for Sari Sari store owners. And of course, for a small social enterprise like us, we ourselves also had to adapt and change our model. But thankfully, we just had to do what we needed to do. And so we tried to react as quickly as we could and really take stock of the situation. And so we tried to get a handle immediately of the state of our Sari Sari stores. We did a sampled survey, and actually just to share some sad yet probably interesting statistics, during the peak of the hard lockdown, we saw that actually more than half had actually closed, and not all, some because of the sales. I would say around 20 to 30% of that, but there was also balance because of fear, really because of the pandemic, but also because during the time of the hard lockdown, and it shocked and surprised all of us, is how do they actually access goods? So the supply chain in the very early months was obviously quite disrupted. And so we also saw that consumer spending had actually gone down in their communities, and hence their sales went down. And we saw a lot of examples and heard a lot of stories actually that inventory that they had meant to sell then became partial inventory that they had to then consume because they also needed it. Okay, so, and as you can see, we then talked about discard tindahan. Pardon the pun to Discartech there. And we worked with some partners actually, and the initial gut reaction was at that time the rage in the first couple of months, the LGs were implementing mobile palenques, and with our mothership company Activatia and some FMCGs, we actually went around in what we call the Tinda Van. And so that was how we had initially responded. But we also, aside from that, we also worked with the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation with multiple partners as well, with the Sari Sari Store project, in order to be able to help a number of Sari Sari stores recover from the pandemic. And as Happy Noy, we had to do a bit of rapid soul searching. Of course, the purpose and the mission is always clear, but how to go about it and how to do it and how to respond in the new normal became really the big challenge and the big question. And so the team adapted and reacted and had to move forward as fast as we could. And so we called this initiative of ours internally and externally Bangon Tindahan. And it is really all about helping Sari Sari stores thrive in the new normal. Now, quite grateful actually. And then for me, honestly, this talk is really a convergence and sort of like a reconnection with certain partners, aside from DG Mert in our work with agent networks previously, which had prepared us really about all of these digital services. I also wanted to recognize, and it really was happenstance, honestly, It's MasterCard who also gave the talk, but the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth actually has supported our program. And what was most interesting really was one of the things they supported was to help Happy Noise start digitizing our training programs. And so this process actually started a couple of years ago. And as you can sense, while we wanted it to move as fast as possible, quite honestly, and that's what we were able to figure out and start implementing with the Center for Inclusive Growth. But because of the pandemic, this became the option, the main option. It was no longer, do we do partial on ground or do we do partial online? It overnight, it literally became, we now have to do our training and community building online. So pivoting from on ground to online. And that was obviously a big help, as well as our partners from Qualcomm Wireless Reach, who of course really had shared their advocacy really to help enable store owners to unlock the power and potential of mobile phones and how they could use them to improve their business there. And so what does it mean actually when we talk about training and community building from on ground to online? And a lot of you are probably like thinking or have encountered Coursera or Zoom type trainings, Zoom type team buildings. We explored that. And in fact, we also have a YouTube channel to help educate that. But we saw that the best way to go about it is to meet the sari-sari store owners where they already were, which is, if we're talking online, quite frankly, that would be Facebook. And so we had looked into this and basically just had to translate and pivot a lot of our content, a lot of our training modules now to this platform. And so I would cluster now the different, we still do actually online training, but in small groups. We still do that in a way, which is synchronous training, but you can only do it in small batches. And again, not all the sari-sari stores are tech savvy. So you have to do that for certain segments only. But by and large, we do it by Facebook groups. And here we see the power of social learning. In Facebook, of course, as well, the power of chatbot-based training. And so we've started this process previously and have actually migrated a lot of it now to chatbot. And there's still quite a number of our training modules that we wanted to translate here. And of course, in this day and age, which organization can avoid the trap of falling into the live streaming game? And so this is, again, also part and parcel of something that we are using, I guess, a tool in our utility belt in order to help train and organize the sari-sari store owners. So let me talk about this one, which is, I guess, hits more closely to the topic at hand. So first thing to do is really to translate and to transition from on-ground training to online training. But it was also about what kind of knowledge, learning, behavior changes, and habits needed to be built. Now, I say this with Happy Noy also having been trying to help enable stores as well. We've had engagements with Smart Padala, of course, GCash, of course, PayMaya, the mobile money wallets. And that now has absolutely accelerated during this period. And so the big chunks of what we wanted to educate the stores on really would be a big piece on digitalization. But of course, we also had to talk about quite practical things as well, which is adapting to the new normal. Now, of course, awareness is much higher. But when we were starting to do this, COVID-19 safe practices, all the way from merchandising, how to deal with customers, readjusting their assortment in order to, to capitalize as well, because some categories will have lessening demand, but there will be demand for new services, new categories and products as well. I mean, face masks as a small practical example, alcohol, and of course, a foray into digital services. And here, of course, with DG Mertangonan actually, who been a strong advocate of this, of enabling agent networks to do digital services, anything from load to bills payments to padala. Of course, now we see a slew of a digital-based access to capital, financing, digital-based record keeping, because that's something that's quite critical for the store owners to be quite acquainted with their cash flow. Digital marketing and selling. And so this is quite an interesting occurrence and phenomenon that we're seeing, that we see the store owners also marketing to their customers on Facebook and of course, even live stream, which is quite fascinating. And of course, digital ordering. So there's a slew of a lot of these technology apps now, and our big wholesalers and supermarkets are also, of course, offering now e-commerce options. And of course, the last example would be really cashless payments. And so mobile money wallets have been trying to really try to bring a sea change as well into this industry and into this micro retail market for the past several years. And I must say, actually, that for the past couple of years, from our personal experience and also working with them, that we've been seeing really the gradual adoption. But I should also now share that since the pandemic happened, and of course, it has created havoc and to our economy and so many lives lost. But I guess in this scenario, we tried to look at silver linings, and then we saw that whereas before we had to do really hard education, or sometimes really encourage and sort of like, how can you nanay really start adopting these new technologies in order to use them for your store. But now we see that it's become a lot easier, quite frankly, and it's fact it has become quite natural because it is now necessary. Now, I'm also the last to say that this has now been easy, and perhaps in the panel we could talk about all the challenges in digitalizing this segment. But suffice to say, we look forward to the future with optimism because of this sea change. And we see this as an opportunity to help the sari-sari stores thrive in the new normal. And these are really the learning elements or the behavior change elements that we at Happy Noi are advocating. We are agnostic. We work with as many partners as we can, as long as this can really help the humble sari-sari store owner. And of course, just to put a face to the partners we serve on the ground and who are now quite interestingly digitizing as well. And it's quite interesting and admittedly satisfying also to see this unfold at this period in time. So that ends my presentation. And I do hope I could answer some of the questions here in more detail later in the open panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. We will now proceed to the open forum portion of the program, which will be led by RCBC President and CEO, Mr. Eugene Acevedo. Eugene is the President and CEO of RCBC. During his leadership, RCBC has embarked on a digital transformation journey, resulting in multiple awards for innovation, including being recognized as Best Digital Bank. He is a BS Physics magna cum laude from University of San Carlos and topped his AIM MBA class. He also completed the Harvard Advanced Management Program. Joining in the panel is Mr. Paul Habrer, MasterCard's Vice President for Real-Time Payments Business Development and Account Management. Paul has 15 years of payment innovation experience in Asia, Pacific, and Europe. Currently, the MasterCard lead for business development, real-time payments. Paul previously managed the Philippines InstaPay and Thailand's PromptPay implementation for Vocalink. Eugene, take it away.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. This is so exciting. There are more than 30 questions. Some were sent via the chat. And I'd like to start because I think we won't be able to finish even half the questions asked. DJ Mert, I'll start with you.
Yes,
sorry
Eugene.
for all the Bitcoin, Bruja, etc. But the first few questions were related to that. And the question was, is cryptocurrency a part of the roadmap? Maybe a national cryptocurrency or will BSP be creating its own wallet? There were three questions, I think even four related to that. DJ Mart, maybe we can address that first.
Yeah, Eugene, I'm happy to. First of all, we view cryptocurrencies not as currency, as we know peso, as we know cash, but we view it as virtual assets. So we have a regulation for virtual asset service providers, including those exchange points where customers exchange their cryptocurrencies to fiat. So those are regulated by the BSP. Now, in terms of digital currency, Eugene, the BSP is watching very closely and working with our counterparts, especially in the region, towards the development of a central bank issued digital currency, or CBDC for short. We have been doing our conceptual research and also working, coordinating with our peers here in the region, our counterpart central banks, in order to harmonize and collaborate so that we don't, repeat researches and that, but instead share knowledge and also coordinate with each other as to which policy objectives could CBDCs be best deployed for. So there you go, Eugene. So cryptocurrency, again, we view that as virtual assets, not currency. And we're also coordinating with we're doing our own research and coordinating with our peers for how a central bank issued digital currency would look like.
DJ Mart, another very frequent question here was about co-ops and rural banks. Some participants were mentioning that they are concerned about the ability of the smaller players to participate because they anticipate that they may not be able to afford infrastructure costs. I'm not sure whether that is an accurate perception, but I leave that with you to answer, please.
Thanks, Eugene. So in principle, we at the BSP promote inclusiveness. So we really want all regulated financial institutions to be able to participate in the national payment system. But then again, we have also the consumers, the customers to look after in terms of their safety, their reliability, the ease of recourse, and customer satisfaction. So we have to balance these. And Eugene, that's the reason why we've been pushing so hard and working with you to promote efficiency so that we drive costs down and up to the level wherein it makes sense for smaller financial institutions, regulated financial institutions, to participate. So that's the objective and direction.
Yeah, I always put it differently. I always say that instead of banks competing with each other and setting up their own rails and spending so much money, we've decided to get together with the BSP and with the EMIs so that we share the expenses. Our partners from MasterCard are here. So it is actually quite cheap for other people to come in. We cooperated in the middle, we compete at the fringes. That's what people say. Maybe the third question, DG, is also a recurring question, and that is, what measures have been taken to prevent hacking or identity theft in connection with the use of QR Ph?
Well, so this falls under the overall scope of cybersecurity, Eugene, and the BSP has issued regulations on implementing cyber resiliency framework. And we are developing a cyber security maturity model in order to help the industry and help ourselves in better monitoring and raising the standards of cyber resiliency in the not only in the payment system but in the financial system as well. So we are serious about that too, Eugene, in working with you to achieve that.
Thank you, DG Mert. Maybe I can now move to our gentleman from MasterCard, maybe connected to that last question. How were privacy concerns addressed in the other countries that you worked with ahead of the Philippines? That seems to be a recurring concern among the participants, not just among the banks, but I think mostly among the businesses that are represented here in the audience. Paul or Robert, any one of you can answer that question, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to say a few words, and Robert, if there's anything else, please add. So this is, I guess, specifically around the privacy concerns to do with things like the proxy, where details are displayed. So as part of the I guess the lengthy implementation of that program, we went through a very detailed assessment with BankNet, with PPMI players to understand what was done elsewhere and what would be acceptable from a Philippines perspective, not just from the privacy regulations, but also consumer practices. One of the key items is in the way that names are displayed. When a proxy lookup is done, that corresponds exactly to what the privacy regulations allow. But more than that, we ask for the participants to opt in their customers. So in other markets where we've seen some privacy concerns, what we've had is banks taking essentially their full database of every customer that banks with them and registering the proxy. And that was something that was seen as unacceptable in the Philippines. And so the individual banks that offer proxy today, as well as the ones who will in the future, need to ask their customers to opt in. It does mean a slower adoption curve and more user education because the customers have to be asked to do it. But it also means that when they're doing it in the full knowledge of what information is shared and the benefits of that. As well, within the proxy service, we have put in various safeguards with BankNet to ensure that it is not used as an open directory to find people's identities, so that there are limits in terms of the number of people you can look up there. And if that person isn't registered, it doesn't tell you anything more about that individual or that phone number or that email address. So, Mr. Acevedo, if I may, I know there was a question around the QR payments and the QR codes, and particularly as a concern with the security of those and
yes.
PSP has taken. I just wanted to add something there that hopefully everyone who's part of this will find quite insightful. So where we've seen QR rollouts elsewhere, the initial part of that QR rollout usually focuses on printed QR codes. And that does create an opportunity in some situation for people to tamper with them, right? To stick another QR code on there, right? That is, and I think that's where the question was coming from and the concern. Now, one of the things asked for by PPMI and BankNet that we will be putting in around the time of around the time when the P2M goes live later this year is a proxy service for merchant IDs. And also there would be one for biller IDs, so a proxy. So what that means is instead of encoding the bank account details in the QR code, the QR code is already set to accept the merchant details. And so a lookup would be done. And so the customer would basically be able to validate that, yes, actually, this is the name of the store, because if a different value was coming up in that, then they would know that there was an issue there. And likely, if it's a face-to-face transaction, the first person who experienced that would actually be able to say something to the person, the store owner, or whoever the person they're dealing with at the point of sale. So that is another learning that we have had, learning that has taken place in the real-time payment space around best practice. And I'm pleased to say that that's already something that's been added to the roadmap that we're working on.
Very good, very good. Oh, there was also a question that was asked frequently, and I actually kind of liked it. How do we integrate credit cards if you want the payment charged? So they basically, not a straight debit from the account, but to the MasterCard, for example. How does that work?
Yeah, so the QR Ph, I believe the way that it's been established, and I'm conscious I'm coming from MasterCard, but we were coming to speak about real-time payments. I believe the QR Ph, I think, does include the data elements or tags that are required for credit card transactions. So to effectively to run that over the rails of any of the credit card systems. And I believe each of the schemes, including MasterCard, is certifying so that the payment could be made effectively with a card, a QR payment could be made with the card. In addition to that, MasterCard is working with some banks to help with their digitization or tokenization of all of the account numbers that they would like to opt in, which would give an opportunity to use the MasterCard QR credentials virtually, but then actually potentially settle in real time.
Yeah, there was also another question. May sound basic, but a question that probably many people are asking. If I'm a merchant, if I'm a corporate customer and I'm not yet used to QR codes, how do I generate my QR code? Where do I go? Robert, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, I was going to say that they're probably going to knock on your door, Mr. Azevedo. So generally the way it works is actually it starts to be an agreement between the merchant and their financial institution, be that a bank, be that a wallet. And so usually what we see is there's an arrangement whereby the financial provider for that small or micro merchant, they will actually provide a service that enables either the transmission of a digital QR for printing by the corporate or by the small business, or actually to provide a service that actually distributes the QR logos themselves. Mark, that may be something you probably see in real life. I know the theory of it.
Yeah, I was not going to say that I could do it for them, but thank you, Rob. The role of the financial institution is to generate the QR codes for you and work out the fee scheme that's still being discussed. Don't worry about that. Let's go to Mark. By the way, Mark, in the Q&A, somebody gave you an invitation. Somebody from Davao, Mr. Matunog, wants to invite you so you can maybe share with them the story of how you were able to digitize the communities that you work with. Now, Mark, I was always very curious. Digital transformation has a lot to do with people, and you don't exactly have the easiest people to work with, or maybe you do. How did you convince the nanays or the sari-sari store owners to go digital?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Mr. Acevedo. Actually, as I was sharing earlier, that we've been at this for quite some time, and as DG Mert would know, there are a lot of I guess not to be discouraging, but I guess probably talk about the obstacles first, and
Okay.
then how these are gradually becoming addressed. Because like um, uh, for us, really, it was a big question. Really was quote unquote the killer app, as it were, a search for a killer app in order to open that up. And in fact, the precursor, I would say, even before the QR codes in the smartphones, really was remittance. That actually unlocked a very practical use case for sari-sari store owners way before digital payments. Because the reality is in the partners that we work with, to be honest, not they're very hardworking, super entrepreneurial, and I really admire how much ambition, not everyone, but how much ambition and drive they have in order to better their lot, their families, and their stores. But getting them to digitize really was they don't do things because it will make them more efficient or because it will become more convenient. It had to be something that was really hit something that was extremely needed. And for us, what really unlocked that, quite frankly, was really remittance. And this was really in the early days, Smart Padala, and then of course GCash Remit, and all of these things. And of course, the pawn shops actually also helped really create this ecosystem wherein thereby suddenly it was a real pain point for Filipinos, especially even domestically, because while we talk about international remittance, domestic remittance from urban to rural money flows actually really drives that a lot. And so for us, the precursor for the use of mobile phones for sari-sari store owners, but first was selling load. But really, when we talk about digital transactions, if you ask me, it was really the Smart Padala and then the GCash Remit. And so this opened it up. Now from there, that really became the springboard actually to new things. So barrier is, what is the use case? What is the killer app? That was remittance for us, probably for sari-sari stores. And I'm not talking 100% across the board, just from our experience. And of course, you have a lot of practical elements, especially in the Philippines. One, internet connectivity, especially in more deeply rural areas. Second, access to device, cost of data. And then, of course, if you're working with a sari-sari store owner, know-how. And so these were like basically a list of checkboxes that we had to gradually address. And so that's how we started, quite frankly. Airtime, worked with different partners who could offer them airtime, offer remittance services. Of course, this one obviously within the purview of the BSP, especially with these remittance partners. And then bills payment. Bills payment then opened things up. And so I think these were the springboards. But for Happy Now in particular, because we're not the technology people, we're the people who work with the nanays and the store owners. And so how do we get them? So a lot of it will still have to go with education, which is the core of what we do, and gradually addressing device access. We cannot solve connectivity. That's for the telcos. And so now I think a perfect storm has happened wherein connectivity is better, device access is better, and mobile smartphones, the price of them have gone down dramatically. And so it's now really a lot more accessible. And so I guess these are just some of the elements. I don't want to ramble on, but basically these were the things that we had to address. But for Happy Now in particular, the most important thing is the human element. And we could go to a lot of other things like liquidity management, where do they cash in, et cetera, considering that we always imagine, oh, cashless is perfect for a store owner. Tell that to a store owner wherein they still have to accept cash. And where do they cash in? Where do they cash in? They don't have bank accounts that they could just digitally top up their wallets. So for them to actually do that, they have to line up somewhere. And actually, the pawn shop started solving that because they were more accessible. And then now banks as well, because of their apps. The applications that banks have started rolling out, I think will create a sea change as well. Because once store owners start adopting digital banking en masse, then we just need to solve how do they deposit and how do they top up. And then that will now connect and all of these things. I guess just to quickly react to the QR codes, what DG Mert had mentioned, because of course that's the credit card terminal conundrum in supermarkets where you have a lot. And for a time, because we've worked with multiple partners, and it was like, okay, there's a QR code for here, this one, and this one, and this one, and this is gonna happen, right? And honestly, a sari-sari store owner can't deal with all of it. I mean, they could if they wanted to, but let's try to simplify that. And I'm so grateful that the BSP has taken this initiative to harmonize it and make it super duper simple with QR Ph.
Thank you, Mark. You answered several questions actually already. Somebody also asked how deep is the usage of electronic payment channels, and you answered that basically remittance was the killer app. And if I may say so, what you've really done was create a financial sari-sari store. That's what you've done, at least to my mind. Now, let me ask
Eugene, can I just say something
yes,
short
please, Mark.
about that? Yeah,
Yes,
so
please.
Eugene and Mark, so the remittance did a lot in terms of digitalizing the transfer of the funds, the transport. But then we have to, Eugene, move further towards the ultimate use of that fund. What is that fund gonna be used for? It's gonna pay for some goods or services, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it will end up with in a point of sale where you exchange your money, your funds with the goods or with the service. So with QR Ph P2M, we want that to happen so that the people who now have accounts and have values inside those accounts, because they received it from someone else, from their employer, from their customers, from their relatives, may now spend that money ultimately digitally.
Digimart, maybe this is the question I'll ask you and Mark together. Somebody asked the question, how can we scale up digital payments, payment usage for micropayments? Mentioned was tricycle drivers, those little things, when buying mangoes. How can we do that? I know that I think the banks and the PPMI and the EMIs are okay with having zero charge for micropayments. I think that's where we're going. So that answers the question that was asked several times earlier. So if you buy a pack of cigarettes or a few sticks, you don't have to pay anything as long as it's micropayment. But what are our plans to scale up digital payment usage for micropayments in general? Digimart, maybe if you can start with it.
Well, you're right, Eugene. We're working together with the PPMI, with the financial institutions, in order to really make the proposition of QR Ph merchant payments very strong for the sector that Mark seeks to serve, and we also seek to serve. So they're very sensitive about fees, and in their business where margins are quite tight.
Yeah.
If you take away like 3%, 2.5%, it won't fly with them. Or if you take a few pesos and they make 5 pesos, it won't. They'll stay in cash. So that's why we're working with you in order to make the QR Ph P2M for micro payments with micro merchants free of charge, so that it doesn't have any friction for the customer to use the QR Ph payment, because it's free when it's used for paying merchants for the customer. And there would be no resistance and friction on the side of the merchant for accepting, because again, if he or she is a micro merchant and for micropayment transactions, then there is no fee. So you put there the convenience, security, without the downside, which is usually the disproportionately high fees.
Yeah.
So we
Mark,
believe, Eugene, that will push the merchant payments.
Yeah, I'm hoping that will happen as well, because if they can do it in China, we should be able to do that in the Philippines as well. But Mark, what's your take on that? You're the one closest to the micro merchants.
I think as one thing I guess I think we're all excited about, as well as the national ID. I think that unlocks really a lot of things because of the KYC requirements and to onboard them to a lot of digital banking and the wallets. I think that will really unlock from a policy perspective, which obviously the government has already initiated and is hard at work at. Because on the onboarding, that's quite frankly one of the pain points that we've also seen. And then we're not saying not to KYC, obviously, in this day and age wherein digital just accelerates, can accelerate behavior we do not want to encourage. But I think the national ID could really unlock that and will allow more people to onboard. Because even us, honestly, in our households, when I ask them to onboard, whether through a digital bank account or even a mobile money wallet, that's where it gets stuck. The ID card. Now, I guess what DG Mert has mentioned, I'll just echo that actually. One thing that's quite from a store's perspective really is when you digitize, and I'm a big fan of digital, I'm a geek at heart, is from their perspective, they lock in their cash when they lock in their cash, they don't see it the way we do. We're in, wow, it's just now convenient because I could just pay anybody and everybody. Because chances are, in my world where I deal online and I deal with merchants that are more formal, and I deal with people who also have wallets and bank accounts that I could easily transfer to, I don't see myself locking in my liquidity when I digitalize. But for a store owner, when they convert their cash to digital, and I say this as a proponent of helping them digitalize, sometimes the belief is that I'm locking in my liquidity, because that's the reality. Because, okay, great, now my money is in electronic form. And along comes, my distributor salesman, who doesn't accept the payment. How can I pay? And then my school now, my kids' tuition, I need to pay for that. They won't accept the digital payment. How do I pay? And so from their perspective, whereas for us, it's convenience, for them, sometimes it blocks liquidity that they can no longer utilize. And so, and this has been the dream of a lot of us and of so many. And of course, it's no longer chaotic, I think, especially as we're seeing with the pandemic.
Agree.
But what we're seeing now really is that it has to be an ecosystem thing, like what DJ Mert had said, where the directed remittance element, wherein you receive it. Credit cards have been doing this absolutely purely digital from the get-go. And so right now, when you deal in the cash element, though, that's what's foremost on their minds. And we felt this when frankly we dealt with both wallets, wherein on one wallet was not interoperable with the other wallet, right? And so these things really form a mentality of locking in liquidity. So to encourage digital, it means the ecosystem needs to go digital. And obviously this is not new news, especially to this audience. But I think now, with the environment we're in, the adoption has absolutely skyrocketed. And I think now the sea change is happening. And we're quite excited, actually, for the future with what's happening now.
What was the experience in the other countries on exactly what Mark and DG Mert were talking about in terms of building the ecosystem? I understand there has to be, the more players you have, the effect is kind of exponential, right? The network effect is key here. Rob and Paul, in the other countries that you've worked with, how were you able to address the micropayments part and the unlocking of liquidity?
Paul, you were closer to Thailand. Do you want to take that one as a good example?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the journey that happened in Thailand, to a degree in places like India as well, is they actually had started with a with trying to register people not as bank account holders, but actually with their national ID card or a mobile number, some identifier that was clear. And the push around the national ID, especially somewhere like Thailand, meant that actually they started to pay basically Social Security or benefits into an electronic account. So you wouldn't no longer go to the Thai equivalent of a sari store and get a cash out. You would be getting that money digitally. And then they created the ecosystem. So quite quickly, the ability to pay P2M and via that it was free for, I think, transactions under 5,000 baht, so probably equivalent to about 6,000-7,000 pesos. So all of a sudden you got your money from somewhere, and it was easier to spend it and cheaper to spend it in that manner than actually go and try and cash out from that account. Then as is being planned right now in the Philippines, is you've got the use cases that started to be overlaid are around bills payments. So they introduced bills payment that was free. So all of a sudden, it meant that for small bills, you didn't have to pay 7-Eleven 7 baht to pay that bill or queue up at the utility company. And really, through a central biller registry, started to I think you gave the example of school fees as a really good one, but they started to move into sectors. So it wasn't just your hydroelectric or your gas bill or that, or your phone bill that you were paying, but actually that you were able to make those bill payments. So actually that became not just the more convenient option, but the cheaper option. And obviously getting a free bill payment versus one that costs you, 7 baht or 10 baht or 10 pesos to make is immediately going to have a pull factor. Now, I think the other example that you used, and I really like both the ecosystem examples that you talked about, is, okay, well, it's great, I get my money digitally, but then my supplier comes and he wants or she wants cash for, that's the wholesaler wants cash for those goods, and how am I going to pay them? And I think some of the things actually in the very near future on the roadmap around particularly request to pay will enable those suppliers to move into a digital space. So it's actually better from the perspective of that supplier. They're providing the correct invoice. There's no need to get the right change. They're getting the money in, and actually they're not collecting it at every shop along the way, but it's already going into the bank account. At the end of the day, they can tally up without any of the risks or costs of that. So I think every market has some unique pull factors, and we're starting from a different place everywhere. So with some unique attributes and also some unique opportunities, and leveraging some of this, particularly on the request to pay and looking at B2B payments, will move us, because you want to get into a situation in a couple of years' time that wholesaler doesn't want to accept cash anymore because they realize the costs of it, and therefore the merchants are, your end merchant, micro merchants actually are asking for digital payments because it's easier than trying to convert banknotes into digital currency.
I think that. Sorry, yeah, Paul. I was going to say, and I think that's right. This is not about which came first, the chicken or the egg. Is it the supply side or the demand side? It has to be the chicken and the egg. Webinars like this, the work that Mark's doing, I kind of listened. I'm normally in the kind of the center talking to folks like yourself, Eugene, hearing, and I know the theory of the sari store owners and so on, but actually seeing that pictorially and kind of hearing that journey, that's the kind of thing to me. It's about, it's about education. It's helping to educate the consumer about what's available. It's helping to educate the merchants about why this could be beneficial to them. It's about starting to get them into that journey where they can generate a financial history, where they can then get access to funds to grow their business and so on, that, you know, unless there are people doing the kind of work Mark's doing, that sort of journey isn't on people's radar. So it was great to listen to what you're doing, Mark. Very enjoyable.
You.
Yeah, I felt the same way. That is exactly why we have Mark in the panel. Now, as I expected, we're not even halfway through the questions, but there is one question that was asked by Richmond Chua, and let me read it. Business usage of online or real-time payments will continue to be challenged if the corresponding document, like for example, the invoice or tax documents, are not digitized. It leaves the process half done. Are there any efforts to digitize the corresponding documentation requirements?
Eugene, I can take that.
Yes, please, Eugene.
In 2019, in my previous life as a digital financial services consultant, we studied this because you know, if you look at the Better Than Cash Alliance study, the business adoption of digital payments is unfortunately so low, and the growth is even slower than you know, you would expect from consumers. So the highest. So we looked into it and studied it and talked to enterprises of various sizes, and the root cause that we saw was really the requirement to keep hard copies of invoices and ORs to substantiate business expenses and revenues, to claim tax deductions, to keep these document paper in hard copy for 5 years. So in a B2B transaction, if you need so badly to have that piece of document, then probably the best way for you is to pay by check, right? Because it's like, okay, give me here's the check.
Kaliwaan.
And then, kaliwaan. And then you give me the receipt. So I walk away with you take my goods, you take my payment, and then I walk away with the receipt and I can use it. So now, good thing, the government in the Train 1 law has mandated our tax authority, BIR, to implement an electronic sales reporting system. So that's basically e-invoicing. And so once that is implemented, it will now digitalize these paper documents, and then there will be no need for me to see you, Eugene, when I'm trading goods with you, because you know, I can take your invoice digitally as I make my payment, and then your electronic OR is also automatically sent to me. So
all good. Now we're running out of time, and in a minute I need to pass this on to Dennis again. You know, DG Mert, you've been in this business, or not business, in this project or adventure rather, for years now. And
yes.
Did you imagine this to be like this at this point? Did you expect this to be as vibrant, at least on the payments at this point? Or was this really as imagined or as planned?
Well, Eugene, I mean, the basic principle that you've mentioned it earlier, the network effect. Because, you know, payments is a two-sided market, right? You cannot grow. Even Rob said that you need the chicken and the egg, because you cannot grow acceptance without growing issuing or opening of accounts. And then it's hard to grow issuing when there's no reason to own an account, which is like acceptance. So you have to grow. So it's really tough. And then with the way we were doing it previously, Eugene, like we were like fragmented, siloed, and our customers of this institution cannot transact with customers of other institutions.
Closed loops, yeah.
So in principle, if you like break these smaller silos down and you establish a single large national network of interconnected payers and payees, then this is what we're experiencing now.
Fantastic.
It will come. It will happen if we maintain that inclusiveness, that that mindset of you mentioned it earlier, Regine. I love that, the principle of the financial institutions cooperating in the center in terms of clearing and settlement, and then competing on the outer in terms of product design, customer service excellence, pricing. Beautiful.
Very good, DJ Mert. On that note, I pass the virtual mic back to the MC, Dennis Valdez. Partner, yours.
Thank you, Eugene, and thank you to my colleagues.
Thank you, DJ Mert. Thank you, Eugene. Again, thank you very much to our panelists for their insights. I'm sure our viewers have been given a better appreciation of the future of digital payments now. So to wrap the discussion and end our program, may I call on our hardworking and of course our lovely ICT Liaison Director, Ms. Consuelo Zondi Garcia.
So good afternoon, everyone. As you can see, today's topic is not about cutting-edge technology. It's not about AI, cybersecurity, or cryptocurrency. And it's an ubiquitous topic, but it is in fact more important because of its transformative impact on the economy. This is why the QR rollout is core to the 3-year digital roadmap of the BSP. And it is an important component to their ambition to have 70% of population to have a payment account, and 50% of our transactions to be cashless by 2023. We are therefore privileged that DG Mert Tangonan graced today's occasion as our keynote speaker, and he gave us a lot of color about what to expect for the rest of 2021, especially on the interoperable QR. Let's have a little bit of a flashback. For some people who might ask, what the hell is QR anyway? QR is actually a quick response. So QR means quick response code. And it is actually old tech. So I did a little bit of research, and it was first used as early as 1994. Take note, it was in Japan and not by a financial institution. It was actually used for car manufacturing because a QR code is a souped-up barcode. It has 100 times X information and therefore very ideal for tracking a lot of these cars that go through the manufacturing timeline. So it took 20 years for QR codes to actually be used in the financial system. And for that, we have to thank Alipay and WeChat. So as I said, the rest is history. Even in the Philippines, it was really GCash and PayMaya that started it because of the ownership of WeChat and Alipay. But it never got traction because it never had the banking system or the BSP, I guess, all behind this. And for the past few months, MasterCard together with BankNet has been actually helping the banks prepare us for the rollout of the QR. And this is why we had today, because we wanted you to see it from your perspective. Therefore, we are very thankful that we have Robert Moore from MasterCard, and of course, Paul, our sponsor, and of course, that together with RCBC, to explain to us what happened to other countries that actually adopted it, how their transactions went up by 7x, and how it transformed their economy. It is something that we look forward to in the Philippines. And we're also glad that we have a very energetic Mark Ruiz of Happy Noy to explain how they have prepared the small businesses to be part of the whole network, our friendly sari-sari stores to be part of the whole network. And we all know that the thousands and thousands of these sari-sari stores that are spread out over the Philippines have acted as actually cash agents and are so important cog of the e-wallet ecosystem. Now, while QR code is an Asian invention, our Western counterparts have actually also taken up the challenge because they didn't want to be left behind. In fact, the latest adopter is PayPal, who has actually adopted and seen an increase in their transactions. So we can say that the rollout of an integrated QR is a really versatile tool for physical commerce and for e-commerce to actually grow. So just imagine, and a lot of things that was mentioned is also by Robert. Stores, even small stores, will now have QR codes on site or in their windows. And you can just aim your smartphones and pick up the goods and leave. Or you can have the curbside pickup and scan and get the merchandise on the curb. Or have your Wasabi, Shopee, whatever delivered to your house and just scan and pay. So the QR code is a very cost-effective way to solve multiple parts of the shopper's journey. And it is accessible to all merchants, especially for our very small merchants. And a happy customer means happy merchants and more happy Pinoys, right, Mr. Luis? So I read somewhere that QR code is a solution that has been there for years. And it was just insert of a right problem. And that problem is the pandemic that mandated social distancing and made contactless payment an imperative. And just think about this. In the latest 2020 research done by Bain, Google, and Temasek, they estimated that the Philippine economy will grow from $7.5 billion in 2020 to $28 billion in 2025. That is a compounded growth rate of 30% annually. That's a staggering amount of 1.3 trillion of transactions value, 75% of which are being settled right now in cash. And I'm not even talking about the physical e-commerce. That's just the economy. So for all of our Finex members and all of the ones in the banking system, let's support the BSP and let's all go behind the rollout of the interoperable QR within the year. And let's turn into a reality, a cashless, contactless society driven by QR codes. So thank you again for joining us today, and thank you for our sponsors, MasterCard and RCBC, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, Zondi. That was a great closing remark. So thank you once again for joining us today, and see you in the next Finex webinars. Special mention to our sponsors, MasterCard and RCBC, for making this event possible. To our speakers and BSP, DG Mert, thank you for accepting our invitation. So this is your host, Dennis Valdez, wishing everyone a good weekend ahead. Stay safe and healthy. And please, may we request also that you fill up the event feedback form, which is currently flashed in this webinar. So again, thank you, everyone, and have a safe weekend. Good night.
Thank you, DG Mert, Paul, Rob, Mark. Thanks, gentlemen. This was a lot of fun and